Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Assistant Director of Strength and Conditioning at the University of Missouri, Brian Mann. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 24 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Again, really excited to have another great guest on the show today in Brian Mann. Brian is the Assistant Director of Strength and Conditioning at the University of Missouri. And recently I'd been reading a blog post by Keir Wenham-Flatt about the APRE method. And it got me thinking that I'd used a similar protocol in, the same name, DAPRE method a couple of years ago. So I wanted to refresh my memory. So I looked it up and found that Brian was the go-to guy when it comes to APRE. So I thought I'd get him on the show to discuss that. So Brian discusses that at length, how it can be used, where it can be used, who it can be used for. We also get into a discussion about bar speed, and Brian really breaks down how bar speed can be used for different training methods. And after discussing at length with Kyle Vale on a previous episode his go-to piece of technology when it comes to velocity-based training, I asked Brian which are his go-to bits of kit. So we discussed the Tendo, we discussed GymAware, and we also touch on push strength and their push band. But just before we get into the chat with Brian, I'd just like to thank the guys that have been in touch over the last couple of weeks, just with the great positive feedback I've been getting from the podcast. If anyone does have any suggestions for guys that they want to hear on the podcast, please do get in touch. I'd really appreciate that. If you do want to listen to previous episodes of the podcast, you can go over to paceyperformance.co.uk. I'll also be putting some show notes on from each podcast. So any links that are mentioned, I know there's plenty in this episode coming up with Brian. I'll put links on there so you can easily access papers and books and things like that. Anything that's mentioned in the episode. You can also subscribe on iTunes, and if you'd be so kind to leave a rating and a review on iTunes, that would be massively appreciated. All these links will be on the website on the paceyperformance.co.uk, and you can subscribe on YouTube as well via the website. And without me talking more, here is the interview with Brian Mann. Okay, hi guys, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Really excited this evening, or this afternoon in Brian's case, to get Brian Mann on the phone. So welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm honored to be here.
Cool. So just before we get started, do you want to give the listeners a little bit of a background on yourself, your experience, your education, and what you're currently doing?
My background is in powerlifting competitively. I wasn't a very good athlete. I wasn't very quick, but I could, lift a lot of weight. So I went into that sport and did pretty well. Then, let's see, academically, right now I've got my PhD. I'm an assistant professor here at the University of Missouri over in the United States, and I'm assistant director of strength and conditioning. I actually work with the soccer team here, which you guys call football. Let's see. Yeah, kind of run-of-the-mill sort of thing. There's not a whole lot super interesting. I got into strength training because of I got into strength and conditioning. I guess this is kind of interesting. Because I was at the right place at the right time. I was sitting there studying, and a guy that just got the assistant job today with the Chicago Bears came up to me and said, "Hey, you're a big guy. You lift weights?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a power lifter." He's like, "Well, I can't pay anything, but you want a job?" So that's how I got into strength and conditioning. I was just sitting, studying, and at the right place at the right time.
Cool. Sounds very familiar.
Yeah. I'm fortunate.
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning wise, I've been doing this for 16 years now, at multiple different universities, here for since 2004, at Missouri State. Well, basically, yeah, over in the UK, you guys won't know any of these universities. So wow.
So how did the getting involved in the soccer program come about, or football program?
Well, man, I just got basically you just get assigned sports.
Okay.
And I actually have been working with soccer now the whole 16 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just kind of got into it, and everywhere that I went, they're like, "Oh, you worked with soccer? Here you go." So I've worked with both the men's and the women's side. Currently, it's only the women here. We don't have a men's team. Yeah, and it was just the luck of the draw, and I've been real fortunate to be able to keep working with the same team, the same coach now for 10 years, and he's allowed me and paid for me to go to places like Dave Tinney's clinic over in Seattle to be able to learn from some of those people that have come there, like Jan Willem from Ajax, and he's had several Europeans over there that I've just learned tremendously from.
Have you had any chance to go to Europe?
I have not yet. I need to apply for a passport. That's one of the things that I want to do is go over there and learn, because technology-wise, you guys are ahead of us. Yeah, you guys in Australia. I mean, with the things that you've been doing, I think medically we've done a lot of similar things, but as far as applying some of those things to the sports performance realm, we haven't done the greatest job of yet. But we're getting there quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So I just want to take you back. I don't know what year it got published, but back to your PhD days. I want to discuss the APRE with you. Can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about APRE?
Yeah, I could give you the whole history of strength training here if you want.
Let's go.
All right, brother. So it all started with a guy named Captain Thomas DeLorme. So most people don't realize, but let me ask you this real quick. If you were to give somebody an exercise program, just the average Joe off the street, and you gave them like squats, benches, lat pull downs, triceps, and biceps, what would the sets and reps be for each of those exercises?
3 by 10.
3 by 10. Great. Perfect. So this is where it came from. So Captain Thomas DeLorme was a U.S. Army surgeon. He was a weightlifter himself, and he dealt a lot with femoral fractures. So what would happen is these guys, initially, this is way back in the 20s, I think, they would have their femoral fracture. They would get casted up. They would get the cast cut off of them. They'd smack them on the rear end and tell them get out there back to active duty. Well, we all know that that person can't hang. I mean, they wouldn't be able to keep up with everybody. They would have tremendous amounts of atrophy. Well, Captain DeLorme decided that he thought it would be a good idea to start doing some strength training with them. So he melted down some things and made some of those little shoe plate weight things, strapped to the bottom of the shoes.
Yeah.
And he just gave them the 3 sets of 10. He had 3 plates, so that's where the 3 sets came from. Then later on, a guy named Dr. Kenneth Knight took that protocol, that 3 sets of 10. First set was 50% of your 10 RM. Second set was 75% of your 10 RM. And third set was as many reps as you could do with your 10 RM. And he had many therapists that worked underneath him. He was a knee surgeon. Well, he was an orthopedic surgeon, and he focused a lot on the knee. And then he took DeLorme's original 3 sets of 10 protocol, which is DeLorme called it the PRE, or Progressive Resistance Exercise Protocol. Other people refer to it as the DeLorme method. And he took that and he added on a 4th set. And he also added on an adjustment chart. You see, DeLorme never did that. And with having multiple therapists under him, he wanted to make sure that the patients got the same care. So he ensured that by giving them, everybody got a chart. So I wasn't super aggressive at giving 20 pounds. You were more conservative giving 10. Every person, no matter who they saw, would get the same changes. He also added on a 6-rep protocol, which this came out, and I believe it was either 78 or 84. I can't remember when that publication came out. But and they just kind of noted that the hypertrophy gains and the strength gains were not congruent. The hypertrophy gains were much higher than I said that backwards. The strength gains were much higher than the hypertrophy. Whereas with the 10 RM, it was kind of a 1-to-1, a very linear relationship, where it was more steep whenever they were doing the DAPRE, the 6-rep protocol. And Knight named it the DAPRE. He wanted to keep that PRE from DeLorme, but he called it daily adjustable progressive resistance exercise. Then Mel Sift got a hold of it. I'm assuming it's Mel Sift, because there's a big, I haven't seen anything in the meantime between Sift's super training and Knight's DAPRE. And Sift added on a three rep protocol. So then that became a 3, 6, and a 10. And that was in his book, Super Training. And he dropped off the D from daily and called it autoregulatory progressive resistance exercise protocol. So I happened to be reading through Super Training because a guy named Thomas Linsky, who's a really sharp guy over here in the States, he said, hey, you got to read this book. I read it. I found the APRE in there, and I had, I believe, women's soccer and field hockey at the time, and I had them use it. I was like, what the heck? Let's go ahead. One of the things over here is that American football is our big, marquee sport. So with them, you go with everything that you know that works. You take some of the smaller teams, and then you can play around with them, because if you mess up, no big deal. That's not where the money's coming from.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So interestingly, after 5 or 6 weeks of doing the APRE 6-rep protocol, my female athletes were doing 6 reps with their old 1RM that we have been using with the traditional periodization. So I took that piece of knowledge from whenever I was an undergraduate in first year of my master's program. And whenever I came here to the University of Missouri, we were trying to find a way to get guys a lot stronger to be able to compete in the Big 12 at the time with the conference that we were in. And I proposed the APRE again. And so what we did was we just, in my PhD dissertation, that's what I'm looking for, was based off of this. And 1 year we did the just traditional linear periodization that we had done, percentage-based program. And then the next year we did the APRE, and that was the only change in the program. Whereas the previous year, the linear periodization, the guys were getting, 5 pounds up in the 5-week period. Not bad. But they were seeing tremendous gains, 25, 30, 40 pounds on their squats, their cleans, their benches, within just that same period the next year with the APRE. So it was just simply, for those that don't know about the APRE, basically it's a thing where everybody, your third set determines your fourth, and your fourth set determines the way that you'll do the following week, following session, however you happen to want to progress it. It allows those who are quick responders to increase more quickly, and the slow responders to increase more slowly. Everybody gains strength at different rates, so we don't want to push people too fast and overtrain them, and we don't want to go too slow and drag our feet on other people and have them not make the gains that they could. So it's something that we've just found has been extremely effective, and now we've been doing it for 9 years, I believe, wow, with a lot of our athletes here at the university.
Right. So would you implement that just for your core lifts, or would that go down the whole program?
Personally, I just use it for my core lifts.
Okay.
I don't think that it's worth the energy to do it on a lot of the smaller exercises. Uh-huh. The way I see it is, if it's one of my core exercises, one of my ones that matter, I'm going to try and use that to progress that and build that exercise. I'm not going to spend that sort of time and that sort of energy doing it on like a bicep curl or lateral raise, something like that.
So what was the buy-in like from the players when this was introduced?
Well, it was the buy-in was actually interesting. It was incredible because it was the first time that they were given autonomy.
Yeah.
And whenever we gave that, and we gave it to them in a manner that it was positive and encouraging, and they absolutely loved it. Yeah, and they were bought in. They're like, I get to determine how quick I can move up. This is awesome. I held my own destiny in my own hands. This is great. Now, I know that a lot of people who have read that study that came out in 2008, I think it was, have said, well, this is just clearly a poor periodization plan versus this other. It's like, if it was poor periodization, it wasn't because we intended it to. I mean, American football is at that time, it was for our institution, it was a $20 million business. We're not going to try and make a mistake on a $20 million business.
Yeah.
So if it was a poor periodization scheme, so be it. But I know what did happen is that whenever we went with the autoregulation, we saw fantastic gains. So if they were dead from running or dead from other things, they weren't moving up. We weren't trying to push them and overshoot them. It's kind of a little bit like, have you seen Milan Jovanović's review on velocity-based training?
I have. He came on to, I think he was like episode 5 or 6.
Oh,
crap. Yeah, do, mate, do.
So, But yeah, he had that. Some weeks whenever he had tested their 1RM by velocity, some weeks their pre-tested 1RM, it was like 120 kilos was a pre-test, and some days their predicted was like 140 kilos or 80 kilos or something like that. So any given day you can overshoot or undershoot, and the APRE is kind of the strength version of that velocity.
Okay. Cool. I just want to move on a little bit.
Yeah.
No. So there's other methods of auto-regulatory training, such as RPEs. How does APRE differ? Is its RPE method something that you've played around with or used in the past?
The RPE, I actually just use that to determine my total training loads.
Okay.
I don't assign loads unless it is on an assistance exercise using RPE. With the APRE, I'm wanting them to push themselves to the limit. With the RPE, I might be like, okay, let's make this exercise a 7 out of 10 today. Right, yesterday was a rough day. Pick a weight that's a 5 out of 10. And that's whenever I use the RPEs. Now, I know that there are some people who've got great successes utilizing those, but I think that training by the RPE is best done whenever somebody is that weightlifting is their sport, so that they understand those intensities. Unfortunately, I don't know how things are over in the UK, but most of my soccer players and a lot of my football players, they're very much novice at strength training.
Yeah.
They don't understand what heavy is. So training by RPE for them is a little difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to ask your opinion on whether it's appropriate for guys who are starting out, because that 7 out of 10 means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Right. Yeah.
Just moving on again a little bit with regards to bar speed. We've had a couple of different guys on. We had Carl Vale on who discussed it at length. I just want to get tie bar speed in with the APRE. Can they be used together?
You know what? I have used them together, and it has worked fantastically. I used it with our throwers, our shot putters, discus, and hammer throwers. And I did it for the Olympic lifts. So whatever, normally you just have to stand up with a weight for an Olympic lift account, right? Well, we had to stand up at the appropriate velocity. So we got this high accumulation of this high quality of training. And the results that they saw in the ring, coaches at other schools were begging to know what we were doing. The head coach said that there were like different kids in the ring because they were so much faster and able to put the force into the implements so much faster in the ring that they were seeing great changes in their throws. We had people PRing, getting personal records in their first meet of the year, and it just continued throughout the year that we did that.
Mm. I think I've jumped ahead a little bit, just in case people are kind of unbeknown to the kind of bar speed. Would you mind just giving us a bit of a background on the kind of categories that you use and have talked about in the past?
Right. Okay. So with the every trait has got a different velocity, right? So if you're looking at let's just go with some of the main ones that people usually look at. So strength speed for a standard lift, like I say standard like squat, bench press, deadlift, etc. Strength speed, you'd be looking at about 0.75 to 1.0 meters per second. That was corroborated not only by, that initially was found by Roman, I believe, and in the management and training of the weightlifter, and it's been corroborated by many different people since then. Interestingly enough, Joseph and Jandaka, probably butchering that. I apologize because this over in Europe, so you guys actually know how to say those things. If it was Smith, man, I'm good.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
They found the exact same velocities, even though they referred to them as a different name. It was velocity load and load velocity, or load velocity was strength speed. Then Sanchez, Medina, et cetera, they found the exact same velocity. So I thought it's like, hey, that's cool. They're right on. This is from the 1960s in the Soviets, and they're finding the same things today. Then there's speed strength. And that is strength speed could be defined as strength and conditions of speed. So you're trying to move a heavy weight as fast as you can, but you're never really going to move it super fast. Speed strength is speed and conditions of strength, or you're moving a lighter weight faster. So speed and conditions of strength. you're looking at like about 1.1 to 1.3, 1.4, depending on the movement. Olympic lifts have got their own movements or velocities. They should all be, they'll all be speed strength. Then above that 1.3, 1.4-ish, you're really starting to look at starting strength, as Anatoly Bondarchuk defined it, where you're trying to overcome inertia very rapidly. So it's very, very low intensity, low external resistance, super high velocity. So starting from a dead stop at like 1.4 meters per second. Going on the slower end, you've really got accelerative strength, which is about 0.5 to 0.75 meters per second. And below that, you get into the circummax and absolute strength. So down to about 0.3 meters per second, according to, I believe it was an Izquierdo study for squat, and 0.15 meters per second for bench press. And it's all dependent upon the amplitude of motion. You've got a movement that moves through a greater range of motion, or you got somebody who's like 7 feet tall. Their velocity ranges might vary a little bit, but it all, ballpark about the same.
Mm-hmm. So is there any references that is kind of gives a clear outline that I can add to the site so people can have a look?
I've got on EliteFTS.com, put out a couple of articles there on it, and I've referenced all the materials, the Izquierdos, the et cetera. I've got an ebook on it that's on that website, and it's also on Amazon. So there's some stuff that's out there, and then beyond that, you could look at the research studies. Most of the stuff by Jandaka and Jadovsev are in their native languages. Fortunately, I had a swimmer that was from there that could read it, so they read it to me, and I had to write it down and figure out what they were saying. And I was like, "Yes, they're saying I'm right." But that's what's going on there. And Mladen's paper from the ASCA, he does a great job in that as well, explaining some things, especially the velocity profile. He did the best job of explaining that I could ever hope for. He did it a lot better than I could have.
Yeah. So when it comes to derivatives of the Olympic lifts, how does that differ? Which category does that fall in? The regular exercise or the Olympic lifts?
So the Olympic lift derivatives, I usually just count them as the whatever the Olympic lift is, except for a pull. Just the initial first pull, well, I guess it's second pull. Not all the way coming up to the top, which we call a high pull here.
Yeah.
I don't know what the KSCA would call it, but like a regular pull would be at like 1.15 to 1.3 meters per second, whereas the high pull, I would go with just about the velocity that is determined for the lift. And right now, and I don't know if Mladen has talked about this or not. Whenever here I am, talking about Mladen, I haven't even heard him on your podcast. But, I recommend that people use the peak velocities for Olympic lifts because the only thing that matters is the top of the second pull. So if you are looking at average velocity, well, that's the average of the beginning to the end of the exercise, right? So a lot of our guys have got orthopedic issues on the football team, et cetera, or even the throwers. They might have a hard time with the rack or shooting their arms through or something like that, which slows down the overall or increases the time spent in the movement, which decreases the average velocity.
Yeah,
their peak was money, but their average was horrible. So we've gone to the peak velocity with that understanding, that realization that, hey, this is the only part that matters. Let's just go ahead and go with peak.
Mm-hmm. So you go for how would that differ for your what you call regular exercises?
The regular exercises, the average velocity is much more important because you spend 36% of the time in acceleration, 64% of the time in deceleration. That's been found by a couple of different people. If you want the studies, I can go find them. I can't recall off the top of my head.
That's cool.
But the average velocity is much more stable for them. With the Olympic lifts, there's only that one moment that matters. That's why the peak is the main portion there.
Mm-hmm. Just to go back to the question that I asked with regards to the APRE, is that something is bar speed something you just obviously concentrate on for your core lifts? Yeah.
I don't worry about it for anything else. I always just go with the most bang for my buck. The other things while they'll matter, and especially if you're trying to bring up the weak link, it really matters. But to say that I'm going to go put a Jim Aware on a bicep curl, measure the velocity of a hip thrust. Man, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So you mentioned GymAware there. Is there any, is that your kind of go-to device, or is there any other things that you've used or recommend?
I really like the GymAware.
Okay.
Evan has gotten in touch with me recently and thought that, and he sent them to me, and the capabilities that it has are awesome. How it monitors everything. I've used in the past for a long time. I used the Tendo and absolutely loved it. Very simple, linear positions transducer. It doesn't really hold a candle to the capabilities that GymAware has with the different measurements and calculations that it does, as well as storing all the data for you, which, man, dude. So we just, last week, 2 weeks ago now, I went up to a Division II, a smaller university in the area. They happen to be doing 1RM testing. And in the past, anytime I wanted to do something, I'd sit there with a pencil and paper and, try to record everything. And with the GymAware, I just hit the guy's name, entered the weight, done.
Nice.
It took everything for me. It was fantastic.
Cool.
Those are the two main ones that I've used quite a bit. I played around a little bit with the push strength, and it's great for getting feedback on if you're moving the intensities faster and slower. And it's accelerometer based instead of a linear positions transducer. So it's going to have some different ways of calculating things. I think it's a good product, and I think it'll be great on down the line. I mean, you've got to do a little bit more with the algorithms than you do with linear positions transducer. I mean, basically, it's crude. It's like a stopwatch and a tape measure.
Right.
Job done, and it's right every time.
Yeah. I was going to actually ask you about the push band, because I think the guy, I can't remember his name, behind it was on with Coach Dose and Will Fleming on their podcast.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I was just going to ask you about that. But is that something you kind of you'd recommend, or obviously it's going to be a lot cheaper than the GymAware?
It's a lot cheaper, and I think that it's got a great price point, and they've got a great means of what they're trying to push with the education. It's a decent product. I don't want to say anything bad about it.
No.
No, it's a good product. Is it as accurate as the GymAware for my needs? No, it's not. But if I were to say, hey, I need you to go home and do these exercises, well, here, take the push, because I want you to do some velocity stuff to make sure you're moving fast. It's good. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a good product. It's just, GymAware really serves my needs.
Yeah. I was speaking to a guy who was on one of the previous episodes of the podcast, one of the soccer guys, and okay. I told him I was speaking to you tonight, and he asked me to mention bar speed when it comes to single leg work. Any thoughts on that? Would you include, would bar speed be important with that kind of exercises?
It really depends.
Okay.
Several years ago, I think it was 2000, getting ready for the 2004 Olympics, I was working with a triple jumper, and I was wanting to make sure that whatever we did didn't slow him down. And on his step ups and his squats, I was actually throwing a Tendo on there and adjusting his load by velocity, because I wanted to stay in that specificity. And that's one of the things that using velocity really allows you to do, is that since your 1RM changes daily, as we talked about with Mladen, we were making sure that we're using the right load to be able to approach the right trait, being strength, speed, or speed strength for him on that day. So can you do it? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's no different. I mean, if you would program and do a percentage of 1RM on single leg stuff, then you can use velocity on it, as long as you attach it to the bar. If you attach it to like the person's waist, then you're actually measuring body velocity. And that recent study by, I think it was like Volek and McBride, showed that even on an exercise as simple as a deadlift, that the bar velocity and the body velocity were different. So I always just stick with bar velocity, because I know what I'm looking at there. That body velocity, that's a whole new can of worms, and it'll take a lot of data and a lot of years to figure out what's going on there. So maybe I'm behind the times. Maybe I'm being, getting that old man syndrome going on now. But I'm going to stick with bar velocity, because I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah, and then the threshold would fit into just your general strength exercise that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And you know what? Actually, I say absolutely. That's what I did. Is
Okay.
that necessarily right? I don't know. His jumps got better. I can tell
Yeah. Yeah.
as far as is that the best thing in the world to do? I don't know. I don't, but I know it worked.
Yeah. Cool. Just last couple of things before I let you go. Guys in the industry that have influenced your practice the most.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a lot of them. One of them actually just got the job with the Chicago Bears. Like I said, Rick Perry.
Yeah.
He brought me in, and he had this huge library. Well, it was huge to me at the time, of these translated Soviet texts, and he encouraged me to read all of them and to go and to learn. Tom Myslinski with the Jacksonville Jaguars, the guy is an absolute genius. Buddy Morris, who's now with the Arizona Cardinals, and those are two NFL teams. I got to intern for Joe Kinn, who's a big-time strength coach over here in the States. He's been to the UKS.
Yeah, he came this year. Yeah.
I interned for him, and he's been a tremendous influence to me. Louis Simmons, love him, hate him, he makes you think. It kind of reminds me of Mike Boyle, but he's more on the meathead side.
Yeah.
I was doing the unilateral stuff, and I might not agree with him every time, but he makes me think. Louis is the same thing towards the powerlifting, and my background being powerlifting, of course, I did a lot of the Westside Barbell stuff. I mentioned Joe Kinn, Marco Iyama, who was out there at the time. Now he's with the 49ers. He was my direct supervisor. I learned a lot from him. There's several researchers out there. There's a guy named Mike Stone. Everybody knows who Mike Stone, who is in training. Love him or hate him as well. I mean, Mike Stone's Mike Stone. He's going to shoot you straight. And he's challenged me a lot to grow and to, prove any point that I had. Along those lines, Greg Hoff, who is now the president of the NSCA, he's down at Edith Cowan University currently. Same sort of thing. Andy Fry, Dr. Andrew Fry, if you've looked at overtraining stuff, you've probably seen his name. He's been interesting thing about him is he's helped me not only on the coaching side, but the academic side as well to meld those two together. And he's done a wonderful job of that at KU. I know that at least in the States, that test cortisol ratio that they did during the entire basketball season, that hit big over here in the news. I don't know if it did over there, but he's made waves here in the States. Pat Ivey, my boss here, has taught. He's been a big mentor for me. I guess it would be, as long as I've talked, it's easier to talk about who hasn't influenced me.
Yeah.
But there's been, and I feel bad for talking so much about some people because I know I've forgotten a lot. And I feel bad because I'm going to have somebody who's going to call me up and be like, hey, why didn't you mention that? Man, I'm sorry. Just straight up forgot.
No, that's cool. Not to rob Ron McKeefer's little kind of roundup of his podcast, but I'm reading blogs from Steve Magnus and a couple of others. Is there any ones that you kind of keep in touch with weekly or monthly or whenever they come out?
Well, I'm always reading Elite FTS. That's I've been reading them since 2000. So out of habit, I read them. And then honestly, what I usually do is sounds kind of bad, but I just use Twitter for a lot. I'll let people read everything and then they'll pop something up. And if there's something that I read a few times, then I'll start going to their blog and like Mladen, his complimentary training. I've been going to that a lot. I mean, that guy's free. That guy's sharp, man. He's PhD. So, but I just use Twitter and then Facebook for those articles that people are posting. I'm kind of letting them be my filter. So then I only go to the really good stuff because I don't have time. So I'm reading all these journal articles and trying to write and coach and research. I wish I had more time to read the blogs, but unfortunately, I just don't.
That's cool. You mentioned when we spoke a couple of days ago, you had a little you called it a semi-funny story.
Sorry, what?
A semi-funny story? How you got into
about the velocity-based training? How I got in touch with that? Well, yeah. So people usually love this. Yeah. All right. So we, long story short, I got some experience with Rick with it. Louis Simmons had just written an article on the Tendo, and we had gone up there, and I had noticed a lot of the velocities in the Roman text, which I reference in my little manual, so to speak. And well, I came up here to Missouri, and I was working on my dissertation. I had my first, it was my first full-time job, my first year full-time job, and I'm also first year in my PhD program. And I'm traveling with women's basketball, and I know that I'm going to be on the road whenever this paper is due. It's a 25-page mini thesis. Well, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I didn't procrastinate. I just got straight out and I wrote this. We're supposed to write it on something that we gave a rip about. So I picked on how the vertical jump is related to improvements in the Olympic lifts. You do Olympic lifts for speed strength. Vertical jump is a measure of explosive strength, which is related to speed strength. Ergo, improvements in clean should make your vertical jump go on. So I'm kicking back and writing, waiting for this backward stepwise logistic regression to learn how to do that and go run my stats, plug it into the paper, the 25-page paper that I already wrote, and be done for the semester. Well, the magic day comes around. We learn how to do it. I take my little flash drive, go over to the computer lab, run it all, and I ran something wrong. I'm finding no relationship. And then I call up a friend of mine in the class who was way smarter than me and way better looking than me. And I was like, hey, Sarah, why don't you help me do this? And so she comes over and she runs it, finds the same thing. So obviously she's not as smart as I think she is. So I take it to the professor. And I don't know if you're familiar with American universities, but this guy had degrees from Stanford, Princeton, and Yale, which are, they're like Oxford, Cambridge.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Type places.
Yeah.
And he said he set me down and we looked at every single thing, the coding, etc. And we reran it. And he's like, is this not what you expected? I go, no. Clean was not related to it at all. It was squat and body composition. So that made us step back, and I brought it to Coach Ivy. And long story short, I could go on and on about this because it's really like another 10-minute story, but I know we're over time here. But basically, we found out that we had to take a step back, and we saw that why are we doing cleans? If we're doing cleans to improve explosive strength, that's not what's happening. So why are we doing them then? So I brought up the experience that I had with velocity, and we started implementing it with the Olympic lifts, with the clean specifically. And a year goes by, we rerun the analysis, and it does become a significant relationship. See, our cleans, whenever we threw them on, the guys the first time, the hang clean was supposed to be moving at the time we were looking at average velocity at 1.4 meters per second. The guy that we threw it on was moving at 0.6 meters per second. So here we are expecting the adaptation of speed strength, but the demand that we imposed was accelerative strength. We were wishing in one hand, shitting in the other, and you can see which one filled up first. So, but whenever we did the velocity, then it became a relationship. The first was improvement in squat strength. The second strength was improvement in body composition. And then clean became a significant factor in the regression equation for predicting improvements in vertical jumping. So that's how we really got to use it and utilize it. And it's something that we saw that, hey, this leads to a better transfer of training. Why are we doing something if it doesn't transfer? It is a waste of our time. So that's really the kind of start that we got into sports science of sorts. And it's been through velocity.
Cool. I like it. So where can people get in touch with yourself and find you on Twitter, email, Facebook?
Yeah, so Twitter, at JBryanMann, JBRYANMANN, the only correct way to spell Brian.
Yeah, of course.
And then we've got then on Facebook. There's several Bryan Mann out there, but the guy with the bench shirt on, looking like this,
the real one
in front of him. Yeah, the real one.
Yeah.
And then my email is MANN, J as in James, B as in Brian, at health.missouri.edu. Lately I've been getting about, between teaching and researching and organizations that I'm in and everything, I've been getting about 250 emails a day. I try and get back to everybody.
How many?
250 is what I've been getting.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, some of them I don't have to worry about. It's just information.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of people who've been asking questions. I try and get to everybody, but if I don't get to you within 3 days, email me again.
Yeah.
I just simply, I didn't see it.
Mm.
I overlooked it. And I might accidentally hit delete or something. It wasn't personal. I've had some people, call me or see me in a conversation. Hey, you never answered my email. Like, dude, sorry, I just didn't see it. So
cool. No, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Brian.
No, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Great.
Enjoyed this part of your podcast.
It's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I will. I'll stick as many. I know you've referenced quite a lot, so I'll stick as many as I can, so people can have a little look at what you've been speaking about.
Okay.
I'll also link it back to your PhD as well, so people can have a little look through that.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Cool.
sir.
And I will thank you again for your time, and I will speak to you soon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. See you, mate.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 24 of the Pace of Performance podcast. I hope you enjoyed the chat with Brian. I was going to do a little roundup and a summary of what Brian had been talking about, but I think a better idea would be to click on some of the links that I've put next to the episode on paceyperformance.co.uk, and that'll give Brian's words in FTS and a couple of his papers, as well as his PhD, that looked at the differences between APRE and traditional linear periodization. Just as a reminder, you can keep up to date with everything that's going on in the podcast if you follow me on Twitter at PaceyPerform. Also, keep checking back to paceyperformance.co.uk, and you can check out all the previous episodes of the podcast on there. Please feel free to drop me a message and recommend any guys that you want to hear on the podcast. And it would really appreciate it if you could leave a comment and a review on iTunes, and that would really help the ratings and get more people listening to the podcast. And that's it, and I will check you in episode 25.